The message from Washington was blunt, bold, and destined to provoke backlash. China must immediately comply with a new U.S. trade ultimatum, or face the harshest economic consequences in modern history. According to leaked diplomatic cables obtained by Reuters, the United States demanded that Beijing eliminate export restrictions on advanced technology materials, open its markets to full foreign competition, and halt state subsidies for national industries. The ultimatum concluded with 5 words that would change global politics overnight. Failure will trigger total isolation. But Beijing's response wasn't fear. It was fury. Within 48 hours, China launched a devastating counterstrike that sent shockwaves through Europe. The target, a quiet but crucial player in the global tech supply chain, the Netherlands. The Dutch government is home to ASML, the world's only producer of cutting-edge EUV lithography machines, essential technology for manufacturing the most advanced computer chips on Earth. Without these machines, modern electronics simply cannot exist. From iPhones to missile guidance systems, ASML is the keystone of the global semiconductor ecosystem. So, when China suddenly announced a ban on all rare mineral shipments to the Netherlands, the Dutch economy went into full alarm mode. These rare elements, particularly neodymium and praseodymium, are critical for the magnets, lasers, and lenses that make ASML's chip machines work. Amsterdam woke up to financial chaos. The Financial Times reported that ASML stocks plunged nearly 14% in minutes, and emergency meetings were called inside the Dutch Ministry of Economic Affairs. Diplomats warned that Dutch compliance with U.S. demands had now made them a frontline target in a trade conflict they never wanted. Meanwhile, Beijing state media blasted Washington's ultimatum as economic blackmail, vowing that China would never bow to pressure from a fading superpower. Foreign ministry officials accused the U.S. of weaponizing global trade and promised retaliation that would reshape the strategic balance. Inside the White House, senior aides insisted the U.S. still held the upper hand, but privately concerns were mounting. A classified assessment from the Commerce Department warned that China's targeted retaliation could trigger a tech manufacturing freeze across the West in less than 90 days. And yet, Washington doubled down. Officials publicly celebrated the ultimatum as a major step to defend global fairness. But China viewed it as a direct attempt to halt its future dominance in semiconductors, robotics, and AI, industries that will decide who leads the 21st century. Across Europe, fear spread fast. Germany, France, and Italy, heavily dependent on Chinese components, called for emergency trade talks, desperate to avoid becoming collateral in a new Cold War. One Dutch official, speaking anonymously to Politico, summed up the anxiety gripping The Hague. America issued the ultimatum, but China chose the battleground, and we're standing right on it. As container shipments halted and supply chains buckled, one thing was already clear. This wasn't just a trade dispute anymore. It was the opening blow in a global economic confrontation that could redefine the world. The fallout from China's retaliation spread through the global economy like a shockwave. In Washington, the mood shifted from confidence to concern as reports from Europe painted a dire picture. The Netherlands, a nation central to the world's most advanced technology, was now paralyzed by a shortage China had engineered in a matter of days. Inside the White House Situation Room, top officials reviewed a classified briefing that suggested the crisis could escalate far faster than anticipated. ASML, unable to secure rare earth elements critical to its lithography machines, warned it could halt shipments to U.S. chip labs within 3 weeks. Without fresh EUV tools, America's semiconductor ambitions faced a catastrophic setback, right as Washington was pushing to outpace China in the chip race. Treasury Secretary and Commerce officials urged calm, insisting the ultimatum was necessary pressure. But defense analysts raised alarms. If U.S. chip manufacturing slowed, everything from fighter jets to surveillance systems would be impacted. One Pentagon official told Politico, "We underestimated China's ability to squeeze Europe, and by extension, us." Meanwhile, Beijing's counterattack wasn't just economic, it was psychological. Chinese state media capitalized on Europe's panic, reminding the world that nearly 80% of the world's rare earth processing happens in China. It was a message to Washington's allies: align with the U.S., and your industries may collapse with it. The Netherlands, usually calm in crisis, found itself at the center of a geopolitical storm. Prime Minister Mark Rutte reportedly called the Oval Office demanding answers and assurances, but Washington could offer neither. European markets spiraled as investors questioned whether siding with the US was economically survivable. Germany, desperate to protect its auto sector, heavily reliant on Chinese rare earth magnets, pushed Brussels to distance the EU from America's ultimatum. French diplomats publicly called for negotiations, not threats. Even longtime US allies questioned whether Washington had thought this through. And while Europe fractured, China expanded its reach. The South China Morning Post reported that Beijing opened new mineral trade agreements with countries in Africa and Southeast Asia, strengthening its grip on supply routes. It also announced preferential export deals for nations willing to support its position against the US ultimatum, a move seen as dividing the West while consolidating power in the global South. Wall Street responded with panic. Semiconductor stocks nosedived, and energy companies warned of equipment shortages. For the first time, investors openly discussed the possibility of a real US defeat in a trade confrontation. In a rare moment of blunt honesty, a senior European trade official told the Financial Times, "The United States issued a challenge China could not accept. Now we are all paying the price." As the crisis intensified, it became clear that Washington's ultimatum wasn't forcing Beijing into submission. It was driving the world toward a new power alignment, one that might leave the US on the outside looking in. As days turned into weeks, a new economic reality began to crystallize, one where China, not the United States, was drawing the blueprint for the future of global trade. What began as a standoff over an ultimatum had evolved into a strategic masterclass in leverage, influence, and control. Beijing didn't just strike back, it reshaped the battlefield. According to Bloomberg Economics, China secretly convened a historic summit with leaders from Southeast Asia, the Middle East, and Africa, regions eager for investment and independence from Western pressure. The agenda was blunt: form a trade network no longer dependent on US conditions. Within days, China unveiled a sweeping initiative, the Global Tech Freedom Alliance, a coalition promising members unrestricted access to Chinese minerals, batteries, and chip technology. Nations once tethered to Washington's financial order now saw an alternative, one grounded in China's control of the critical materials superhighway. Europe watched nervously as its industries crumbled under mineral shortages. Dutch officials, desperate to restore ASML operations, pleaded for exemptions from US policy. Germany warned that if the crisis continued, Europe might be forced to choose economic survival over American loyalty. France went further, openly supporting a diplomatic reset with Beijing. The harsh truth was becoming undeniable. US pressure pushed China into a position of dominance, not defeat. Inside Washington, frustration turned to alarm. The Commerce Department warned that US on semiconductor independence, the centerpiece of America's future defense strategy, could be delayed up to 5 years if China's mineral ban continued. Tech CEOs privately urged the White House to seek compromise before the Western chip sector collapsed entirely. Meanwhile, Beijing showcased its growing confidence. Chinese state media released images of new rare earth processing facilities opening across Inner Mongolia, signaling that China's monopoly would not be challenged anytime soon. Analysts at The Economist labeled the moment the largest shift in economic power since the rise of the US dollar. And the Netherlands, once a quiet trading nation, had become the symbol of a new global divide. A Dutch diplomat captured the fear spreading across Europe. America can issue ultimatums, but China controls the consequences. As the world divided between those who depended on China and those who feared it, one thing became certain: the US had triggered a trade war without fully understanding who owned the weapons. In the emerging order, power is not measured in tariffs or threats, but in who controls the minerals, the supply chains, and the future of technology. And with a single strike, China had proven it controlled all three.